The views and opinions of the Jonathan Kinloch Show are not those of WADL Detroit.
Welcome to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. With ongoing investigations into Wayne County Executive Robert Ficano still says he can lead Wayne County into the future. When we come back, we'll have a conversation with Wayne County Executive Robert Ficano. Robert Ficano, once viewed as a rising star within the Democratic Party, his name has often been mentioned as a contender for the office of governor. With all of the investigations that have basically been swirling around Wayne County, Robert Ficano is saying that he can still lead Wayne County into the future. We have the county commission doing its investigations as well as various federal probes. We also have indictments of former officials within the county administration. Robert Ficano is here in the studio, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Glad to be here, Jonathan.
Well, prior to your election in 2002, you were the sheriff of Wayne County, and a lot of folks had a lot of faith in you. You were viewed as a rising star within the Democratic Party, both locally and potentially national politics as well. With all of these concerns that are going on surrounding your administration, as well, more specifically the indictments, are you able to continue to lead Wayne County into the future?
Sure, Jonathan. I ask people, first of all, were there mistakes made? Of course, people always make mistakes, and you ask what do you do about it, how do you correct it, and how do you move forward. But what I ask generally people is that, look, I've been in office for 30 years. You know by family members or friends that people don't change their stripes or what they've done over 30 years. For 29 and a half years, people have said that we've done an excellent job running things. Is there going to be some bumps and things that occur sometimes? Of course, but the real test of leadership is that once you see it, you correct it, and you move forward at this point. None of it swirls around me personally. If some people have done something wrong, they should be held accountable. We've been completely open. We've been completely supportive of looking at who may have done anything wrong, and if they've done, then they should be punished for it. But we're able to lead on, and there's a lot of positive things that are happening in the county at this time.
Well, prior to you winning the office of county executive, you were the sheriff of Wayne County, as I mentioned, and you fought a lot with the former county executive, Edward McNamara, on a number of different principal points. There were investigations into that administration. You were viewed as a person who stood up for what was right, who wanted to clean government. And when you ran, you said that you were not going to hire a deputy county executive because a lot of folks, you said that you were not going to hire a deputy county executive or fill that position. What happened was that not only did you fill that position, which in the previous administration was viewed as a very powerful position, you also kept a lot of that power within that position of deputy county executive. And now, from published reports, a lot is being laid at the former deputy county executive's feet. But the buck stops with you.
Well, I think if you look at it, I think what we said was we're going to cut down the number of appointees, and that's what we've been able to do. Most people, most people look at, when you hear the word appointee, they think of the old Chicago ward system. In Wayne County, under the charter, there's 220 positions that are mandated by ordinance and charter that cannot belong to the union. Therefore, they have to move into a position of being at will. That's basically what it is. When I came into office, Mr. McNamara, I believe, had over 300 at-will employees. I'm down to 175, but most of those are mandated by charter or by, as I said, ordinance, that they cannot be in union positions. They can't be represented by a union because they're considered management. Now, those same type of positions are in the other counties. They're in state government, but many times they're covered by collective bargaining agreement. This form of charter government was voted on by the people, and they said that the at-will employees are something that they felt that was important, and that's why it's in the charter. So there's sort of a misperception that these are like the old Chicago ward system. So what you're talking about is that the attorneys and corporation counsel, those aren't represented by a union. They're at-will employees, but Oakland County still has, corporation counsel with all the attorneys. They happen to be represented by collective bargaining agreement. Ours are at will. The medical examiner, staff that are in the roads and things like that, where those are normally under road commissions, they're not under the charter, and they're not represented by collective bargaining agreements.
There are charter mandated positions, but as you mentioned, there are also positions that are created by ordinance. In order to be created by ordinance, that requires a vote of the county commission and your signature to create those positions that are created by ordinance. You also have positions that have
but they're created. They may be created. They're not created by ordinance. It just says whether they're covered by collective bargaining agreement or not. The positions are there. It's whether they become under collective bargaining agreements.
Part of a bargaining unit.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that there's a second tier of positions that have basically been viewed, for the most part, as political appointees or further expanding on cronyism, with a continuing cronyism that was viewed to happen a lot in the previous administration. We had reports of some of these positions being paid out of funds that were not proper. And so what I'm saying is, could you eliminate some additional positions by bringing those positions in compliance, or spending of those monies for those positions into compliance with statute? Because I believe some of those positions are now under investigation.
Well, if somebody has done something wrong, they'll be under investigation, whether they're an appointee or whether they're under a collective bargaining agreement. But here's what it is. Again, Jonathan, we started with 300 appointees, over 350 by Mr. McNamara. I have reduced it down to 176, I believe at this time, that are not covered by collective bargaining agreement. I have reduced down the county workforce. When I came into office, it was 5,500. Today, it is at 3,500. Now, we've done it in ways that the same way that they've done at where I think you blog for Detroit News. Those corporations have done buyouts. They have done separation agreements. We followed the same pattern. We've done the same thing as Ford Motor Company, the same thing as General Motors, and others to weed reduce down our workforce. And what we've done it with management as well as we've done it with people that are workers and covered under a collective bargaining agreement.
But with Wayne County faced with a $200 and some odd million deficit, and the state now looking at the county's finances. On the other side of the break, we'll have a conversation about the state of Wayne County's finances. Here on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, we're having a conversation with Wayne County Executive Robert Ficano. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. You can also catch the Jonathan Kinloch Show weeknights at 9 on News Talk 1400 WDTK. You can also stream the Jonathan Kinloch Show at thejonathankinlochshow.com. So visit our website. You can download the podcast and get additional information and news. Here in the studio is Wayne County Executive Robert Ficano. We have been talking to Robert Ficano as it relates to the ongoing investigations, as well as some of the financial decisions that have been made within Wayne County. Mr. Ficano, before the break, we were talking about the deficit. The state of Michigan is now reviewing the finances in Wayne County as they have reviewed the city of Detroit. But with Wayne County, they're looking at them a little bit differently. They're not, from my perception, they're not as aggressive in their approach in trying to get to the point of a consent agreement or an emergency manager. An accumulated deficit of $150 million. Do you believe that this alone warrants more attention by your administration to make cuts to those appointee ranks?
No, you have to understand, accumulated deficit is a deficit that's been accumulated over time, and there was two causes for that, why it occurred. Number one, the courts, if you go back to Governor John Engler, if you remember at one time there was something that was known as Recorder's Court. What he did is they passed legislation and they imposed the running of the courts onto the county. That was an additional expense. The courts, as long as the economy is going well and property taxes continue to go up, we were able to absorb that. The problem is the state never gave us any money for running the additional 30-some-odd judges that were in their courtrooms and their caseload that was put on us. At that point, once the economy dropped, the court continued to spend at the same rate. Now, there's a separation of powers argument here. The court have said, well, it's sort of like your neighbor having your credit card. At that point, even though the economy may be going down and they have your credit card, you go to them and say, you know, you can't spend the way you did in the past. The court said, you're the funding body here. We'll spend to what we think is appropriate, and you really can't tell us to do anything differently. The only way it was ever resolved is through litigation. And you can imagine how that is. A Wayne County judge couldn't hear the dispute, but it went to a colleague in Oakland or Macomb or St. Clair County. So there wasn't a great success rate that was happening. Finally, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, at this point, we're not going to allow suing anymore. You're going to have to resolve the problem with the county. And that's how we were able to reach a resolution, because every year we'd accumulate deficit because the court would continue to spend, even though we would ask them not to do it. So it resulted in about $80 to $90 million in the accumulated deficit. The other one was we were having difficulties with some of the collective bargaining agreements. AFSCME was not taking the 10%, as was all the other unions, and so we continued until we were able to find a resolution with that. At first we imposed it, and then after that they came and they bargained, and now they're taking the 10%. So what we've asked now is for the state, and you said it's being handled differently than Detroit. It is, because Detroit's being looked at, or was looked at, through the PA4. I think you're very familiar with
Absolutely.
what that is. We're not being viewed under PA4.
But let me say this, a couple of things. One, accumulated deficit, structural deficit, a deficit exists within Wayne County. Now, because
of the courts and because of the prior collective bargaining agreements.
I understand that, but it's still the responsibility of the county commission as well as the county executive to address this deficit, to deal with the accumulated deficit, as well as the reason why the city of Detroit finances is being reviewed under Public Act 4 is because it was the decision of the governor and the treasurer to do so. Mm-hmm. Wayne County, according to all accounts, have basically met the requirement of a certain number of those triggers within Public Act 4. So, but you all are still...
On the radar screen, there's under Public Act 4, there's 19 trigger points. We've reached 4 of them. As many of the other communities throughout southeastern Michigan, and as well as, for example, one thing is the pension fund. Is it fully, funded? That's one of the trigger points. And
but we heard some reports as it relates to the issues with the pension as well. That sure. is a problem, and that was a part of the problem is that your administration chose to continue to have these lofty pension plans that existed in previous administrations.
No, that's not true. What has happened is that there was buyouts, just like there is. We save about $2.8 million a year buyouts that we're able to do. The same as what the paper you worked for has done in the past.
Let me clarify. Let me clarify. I do not work for the news. I contribute sometimes for the Detroit News.
Right. If you look at the history, and they were owned one time by Gannett. They did buyouts. They all have done those type of things in the process. We followed the same model as what Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler's and some of the others have done as well. But for example, when you look at it, when the state is looking at like our pension, unfunded mandate and healthcare costs, they said it could reach $1.5 billion, right? You know what the unfunded mandate is for the state right now and their pensions and everything? $50 billion. Wall Street Journal wrote an article on that. So why is Wayne County and Detroit being the poster child when the state has so much of its own issues? This is something that all of us have to resolve. The pension system, could it be run better in Wayne County? Of course, but I'm one of 8 votes. I don't control the pension board. But the state of Michigan has a $50 billion unfunded mandate. Now, if you were to run a headline, is it bigger to say there's $1.5 billion, tied to Detroit and Wayne County, or $50 billion that the state has to deal with as well?
But at the end of the day, cities, townships, villages are creatures of the state. They're holding the guns to our head. So at this particular point, what we as local communities have to begin to do is wrestle these deficits downward and begin to provide adequate services to the citizens, because these issues, these debts are definitely having an impact on safety across the board. So
we have a plan. The way it's set up is that we have a plan in front of the state. They've come in to look at our finances to see if the plan works.
But also,
so it's a big distinction between that and Public Act 4.
But also they're looking at it as it relates to whether or not monies were misspent, particularly from restricted funds that were only supposed to be utilized for specific services.
That's not true.
Okay, we'll get into that on the other side of the break.
Okay. That's a misunderstanding.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Mr. Ficano, before the last break, we were just talking about what the state of Michigan is actually reviewing as it relates to Wayne County's finances. I mentioned that the state is looking into Wayne County's finances specifically to identify whether or not monies were misappropriated, and then you said that was a misunderstanding.
No. What they're looking at is they're looking and reviewing if we can meet our deficit elimination plan. And here's how it works. See, we get a number of grants that come in, and in there are administrative fees that are part of the grants that come in. So if a grant's like $100,000, you can take 10% for administrative fee. In the past, they've always said, if you take that administrative fee, if you didn't spend it, whatever you didn't spend went back to the state. Part of our deficit elimination plan is saying, look, if we can be efficient, let's say that we can administer that grant for 6%, let us keep that 4% and apply it towards the deficit in what is being set up. So we want to be rewarded for being more efficient and not have the money go to the state.
Let me ask this. Okay, that is, I believe, dealing with mental health monies.
It's across the board.
Okay, well, mental health monies as well as road funds. There were some concerns and some articles that have been published as it relates to positions that were actually filled using road monies that weren't properly being spent, that you had positions that were filled with political
that's part of the misunderstanding.
cronies.
You get a 10% administrative fee. You take the money and you can use the administrative fee for hiring people or whatever you're going to do.
Would it have to be within that department? Because you had some folks, there are some folks who said in the road department, for instance, that they didn't do any road work, but they were being paid out of the road fund.
No, we asked, because we've been laying people off, we asked people to multitask. So that if you were paid out of the road fund and you did some of the road work for things like that, we ask you to go around and do other things as well, other functions.
Okay, multitask.
Jonathan, nobody has said that they don't put 8 hours a day in at work and that they don't work the hours. They're looking at the accounting of how they're paid.
But generally administrative fees, because I've been around for a while, I'm president of the Library Commission, serve on the school board. When you talk about restricted funds that come in from grants, generally those services need to be provided for that grant. And when you talk about administrative fees, generally, though, like I said, those services should be provided to administer that grant specifically.
And if we can be more efficient and we can administer it, if we get 10% administrative fee and we're able to administer it only using 6% of it, we should be able to use that money to be spent in other areas that are going to help the county.
Well, that could create some issues.
Why?
It could create issues because you can actually utilize that money for any purpose, to hire individuals who. But first of all, the grants specifically. Let me just talk about these grants are created because there obviously is a need. There's obviously a need, and particularly when you talk about mental health services, every dime that comes into Wayne County should be spent on mental health services. The Wayne County Jail is now the new health facility within Wayne County. So I don't believe there's any too much wiggle room that's available if you have an option to use this money to address some of these pressing needs in Wayne County.
I know, but you get a 10%, John, I'll go back to it again. You get a 10% administrative fee. That they say that's what it takes. If we can narrow it down to 6% and we can use it to help other programs in Wayne County, shame on us if we don't do that. We make people multitask. The day of doing only one function.
But that's too. Well, I'm saying when you say multitasking, it depends on what that task is. You're a political entity, and to have that type of discretion when monies are sent to a community for specific purposes, that leaves too much room for potential problems. I.e., you have, for example, former appointees who saying that they were multitasking, and once it has been identified that they were paid out of road monies in which they did not know they were paid out of road monies, now they're paying the county back. They have to pay the county back because that it was a one Ernest Johnson, a former appointee of yours, actually came on my radio show program and said that he's now having to pay the county back because he said in published reports that he never did any road work, so now he has to pay the county back, and that was very amazing to me.
Well, what he was doing was looking at housing that had to be torn down. I mean, for example, if you have housing and we want housing to be torn down, we have somebody go out and identify the housing that's part of it. To me, that's a function that blends into what the county is doing. The bottom line is, do you deliver the service? If somebody is stealing the money, if somebody's doing something inappropriate with it, yeah, go after them. But, you know, if in business, take a look at it, Jonathan. On the assembly line, we now ask the factory worker to multitask. Before, they only did one thing, one function. Now we ask them to do several
Absolutely.
things.
No, and government
should do the same thing.
Well,
you shouldn't be limited to one function.
We're almost out of time.
Sure.
Almost out of time. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Look, are there any regrets? Are there any regrets? Would you have done anything differently? Specifically, would you have, upon taking office, would you have had more oversight? Or I'll let you explain. What would you have done differently to prevent us from being here?
You always make mistakes in life, and what it is what do you do once you learn from it, you correct it, and you move forward? That's what we've done. Like I said, I've been in office, Jonathan, 30 years. People thought we did a great job for 29 and a half years. So now you run into some problems, and you probably have relatives. You know what their real history is like. If you've known them for 20 or 25 years, people don't generally, you know, they say a leopard doesn't change their spots. The same thing here. If you've been consistent, pretty much what you've done for 29 and a half years, and then if somebody, if things happen that shouldn't have happened, you go in, you correct it, and you move on. What I'm saying is judge it overall in the evaluation. And it's a new time. We have to be more efficient. We have to multitask. Government has to become more efficient in what it's doing.
Would you seek re-election in 2014?
That's way premature. We still have 2 years yet.
Well, a lot of folks, if you're paying attention, a lot of folks are talking about the next county executive as well as the election for the office of mayor of the city of Detroit. Quickly, what's your take on the buzz about Mike Duggan running for mayor of the city of Detroit?
Well, Mike's a very aggressive person. I think a lot of it depends on whether Mayor Bing decides whether he wants to run or not. But there's others in the wings like Benny Napoleon too that could be formidable in a race like that.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and we'll definitely be back in touch with you because there's a lot going on in Wayne County and in the city of Detroit. I know of no safe repository of the ultimate power of society but the people, and if we think them not enlightened enough, the remedy is not to take power from them, but to inform them by education. That's what I hope we do here each week on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, educate you and inform you on all of these issues around here. Until next week, same time, same station, have a great week.